So right now in the world, you see a lot of people losing their jobs because of AI. But you know who isn't losing their job because of AI? Laborers. Because you still have to do certain things with your hands physically. Like you still have to my job is not in danger of being taken over by AI because AI can't do pipe fitting. It can't, it can monitor flow rates and it can monitor pressures and whatnot, but it can't like problem solve like in the moment while pumps are going wrong. And it can't fix them at that moment. So,
Yeah.
but like so many people right now are losing their jobs because of AI, and it's weird to me, like, because that was the physical laborer position was always framed as this is the job you get if you're not qualified to do anything else. And in a sense, that's true. But now they've trained AI to like take all these jobs that require qualifications, but the jobs that don't still have to be done by people.
It's a very interesting place in time at the moment, isn't it? Because in some way, I remember when I was a kid, and before even I was like, I'd formally call myself like, oh yes, I'm anti-capitalist, I'm socialist, whatever. Like, you've got this idea that yes, once we get the technology, we'll be able to let computers manage the hard tasks, and we'll all be able to enjoy ourselves and live in like a Star Trek-esque. The fact that when I was younger, maybe when you were younger as well, like when people look to computers, they imagine like a nice progression for the species. But as you said, right, like it's rather than it being used to actually sort of benefit the whole of humanity, it's people with billions thinking, well, we've now got this tool that can get rid of all the qualified, so to speak, laborers that we've had to pay more because they've got a degree or whatever, and they've been the manner in which Western economies have developed their economies, right? Professionally trained and educated employees, sorry.
Yeah.
And there's also that element of taking for granted of the physical labor that has gone into much of the world's development, because, as you say, the unqualified are only unqualified because they've not met some capitalist criteria.
Right.
They're still doing tasks which require skill and time and effort. And even what really frustrates me is even the person doing the easy job, A, it's not as easy to think, and
Right.
B, it's still labor. Like you still needed it to make whatever you're making. Like even if your job is literally just brushing some leaves off the path, like you still wanted that done to improve your environment. And in many cases, if you didn't have it done, you'd notice what would happen if you didn't after a while.
Yep.
It's still important. But now in this moment in time when much of the backbone of like, oh, get a degree, get a good job that pays enough to, well, doesn't pay enough to get rent in many cases, but
right.
It pays enough to have a professional, sounding life and such, and be able to say, yes, I've got a degree, I can do most of the jobs that are available and such. That is being eroded. And I think that then takes away the capitalist state's requirements to provide rights to much of its citizens,
right.
Which is why so many of them are comfortable letting austerity programs just take away all the funding for transportation and healthcare and such, because they now no longer require the the need to provide rights and services to many of their citizens.
Yeah,
which is a scary moment for us, really.
Yeah, it's you gotta wonder on some level, because they've devalued, like you say, like the quote unquote unskilled labor so much that they can now justify, in many cases, underpaying people so that they can't afford life.
Yeah.
And then now they're replacing all these quote unquote qualified or professional services with AI or robotics or whatever tech they can fill into those spaces. And so now you're left with extra workers, because there's going to be people losing their jobs. So now you're left with like that superfluous, or not superfluous, that excess workforce who can replace the workers who are currently doing the underpaid work. So then if your underpaid workers complain, you can replace them with people who won't complain. And it's like, Yeah, like it's all. I mean, it's a downward spiral. Ultimately, is what I think it's amounting to.
Well, exactly. And when it's all controlled by an increasingly small number of corporations too. I mean,
Yeah.
Amazon dominating like grocery.
Yeah.
20% of grocery
Yeah.
retailers and sellers are Amazon backed, which
Crazy.
is scary. But
That's crazy.
You know, the fact that they've then got the money to say, well, we're not going anywhere. You're going to meet our conditions. Otherwise, we're getting one of the 20 people fired from the office down the road. Like,
Yeah.
it is scary. And there's an element of lost like physical labor too. There's a physical labor that's not even covered when it comes to AI, right? Because we so cleanly divide society into the natural physical labor and the
Right.
Western office work. But to get the computers and the tech and stuff, you need to have physical labor to remove it from the earth.
Yeah.
You need to have obtained the rare earth metals, you know, your lithiums and your cobalts and nickel and whatever else goes into the computer.
Yep.
And that comes from places like the Congo, where
Yep.
the Western corporations are happy to sit back and let warlords and profiteers basically run slave mines
Yep.
to take the metals out of the earth. Like, there's still physical labor happening. It's been abstracted and removed from the Western
That's right.
locale and taken for granted.
Yep, absolutely. And a lot, like you say, like it's literally like slave labor in many of those mines, right? Those people are trafficked. They're not choosing to work there. They're stolen from other places, or they're lured, right? I know they're lured there with like promises of better wages or whatnot, and then they just never get paid. So
Yeah.
like it's but and of course the powers that be, they all know this is going on. Like like the US government knows that the resources we use in our computers and whatnot that Nvidia is purchasing or whatnot, they know that this is being exploitative, but they don't care because it serves the profits of the wealthy, right?
Exactly. Like, it would be disadvantageous to say, yes, this is wrong, let's stop this, because they would inevitably have to, if they were genuinely interested in making a fair situation, there would undoubtedly be some workers who would say, well, we've noticed that your stocks are up like $1 billion.
Yeah.
Can we have some of that? Can we get a fair price for the
Can I
stuff we're
get
giving you?
any wage at all? Can I get food, please?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like that the element of slavery within our economy is something which is not even just in the like it's obvious to point it out in the Congo, where
Right.
it's literally barrel of a gun, go down the mine or we're killing you.
Yeah.
It's also in many labor arrangements across the West and
Yeah.
across the wider world. So obviously the incarcerated population is one of the obvious ones, because literally in the US Constitution, we will no longer have slavery except as punishment for a crime.
Yep.
And who has the greatest proportion of incarcerated
No
prisoners?
kidding. Yeah. Go figure,
So
right?
you've got, which their corporations make a killing off their unpaid labor army they've accumulated, right?
Yeah.
Walmart, McDonald's, Target. It's staggering how much money they make from it.
Oh yeah.
But then there's lots of developing, not even developing really, but like middle economies. So I'm a big football fan, soccer. You know, the way sport has been used to generate money for capitalists is quite staggering. And
Right.
when we look at nations like, so the most recent FIFA World Cup was held in a country called Qatar. Very small nation. Obviously, it's a kingdom. It's not a democracy.
Yeah.
And so to build their stadia, because they didn't have the infrastructure there, they used programs to get thousands of workers from surrounding Middle Eastern, African, Asian countries to come and work there. And so the employers would obviously put out these contracts and say, yeah, we'll give you this much, come and work for us. We'll handle your logistics and stuff, but you come and work for us. And so obviously if you're in a country like Eritrea or Ethiopia, it's quite promising to be able to suddenly have thousands of pounds, or the currency. I don't actually know the exact currency in Ethiopia, but you can imagine it's a life-changing amount for someone to be able to send to their family. But they get there and their employer takes their passport, has their documentation, and now basically you work under whatever conditions they've set. Otherwise, off you go. You get entertained, and you can imagine it's not really the same. If a Western citizen has an immigration issue, that's like a big, they've got a lot of international power to make it right. Ethiopia might not have the same jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Right? So that work is now at the expense of some exploitative boss who wants the stadium built as quickly as they can. And so they don't care that they're sending these workers to work in like 50-degree heat.
Yeah.
They don't care that they're working like 14-hour days with very little for their food and drink and such. And so as a result, you've got...
Yeah, it's my understanding too that often those employers will not pay you for months in Qatar specifically. Like I know, I think it's like some of the people from Burundi that my partner knows went to Qatar for work, and they have communication out. Like they're not prisoners, but they don't get paid regularly. And if you don't get paid, then like you have to be able to like buy your own food. You have to pay your own rent. And if you don't do that, you can end up in a prison of sorts, or eventually kicked out with no recourse and no, like, so they could just not pay you. And then if you don't pay your rent, you get kicked out of the country, and you just never have any access to that money that you supposedly earned, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like
it's awful.
It's so horrendous, and it speaks again to that Western complicity.
Yeah,
right. Because they, like FIFA, let the World Cup go there. Western nations are happy for their games to be played there.
Yep.
They know, and they're getting tons of money from Middle Eastern companies and such to sponsorship. Like so much money has come from countries with terrible human rights records, just flooding into our sports and some wider sort of society as well, right? Because it's not just sport; it's everywhere.
And like the media and protests often covers, like, specifically in Qatar, right? Like there was a lot of like backlash from, say, like the French football team. They because of the Qatar's issues around LGBTQ plus people. And and I'm not saying that was wrong, that shouldn't get coverage, but you see a lot of coverage about that briefly, and almost nothing about the slave labor.
I think it's very much a Western. There's an underlying layer of Western superiority. Like, oh yeah, we've got all the rights, and we're advanced enough to learn that gay people should exist. Which, I mean, firstly, ignores the long history of not only oppression of LGBTQ people in the West, but like the fact that the West were the ones who sent missionaries off to various countries and told them that yes, there are two genders and gay people are immoral sinners and such. Like, we taught very much our own patriarchal, cis heteronormative like stuff to the rest of the world. But there's an element of that underlying the savages elsewhere versus our enlightened culture, which lets them focus on that. Because if they were to focus on worker rights and oppression, there might be some scrutiny put on our nations, which are slowly disintegrating.
Also, geez, eh? Yeah.
It's staggering.
It's terrible. It really is terrible. I guess though, part of what we were going to talk about though today was you had a debate with someone relatively recently, and I did try to watch it, but I only got through like, I don't know, 1 minute or something. Like as soon as your debate partner showed up on the screen and I heard their voice, I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to like this.
Well, I'll tell you now, you saved yourself 2 hours of nonsense.
Excruciating.
I mean, I often know going into some of these discussions, but it's going to be one that is one to reflect on rather than one to get anything from the actual conversation. Right. But I find this sort of person very informative on the way American right-wing politics is going. So, for context, the person I spoke to, a man called Eric, Christian Trump supporter, and I find this as like a subtopic quite interesting. The values of Christianity, of Jesus and of treating people with the respect because they are God's creations and such.
Right.
Like just absent from anything to do with the Trump Republican agenda of like America first, make America great, kick out the immigrants and such. Like it's very, even on a basic level, like just not at all anything to do with what Jesus taught.
Right.
Like even the idea that, I mean, to some degree, because I find, I'm not religious myself, but like the idea that you know, God creates all life, like God made everyone equal under the eyes of God.
Right.
He didn't say, yes, you are American. Like, so on a basic level, the idea that you would have a nationalist movement that is Christian seems quite like they're two conflicting ideas, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Christianity is supposed to be a global religion, right? In a sense, like there's supposed to be people of all cultures and communities are supposed to be part of this one religion because they believe in the word of the Almighty God. So this exclusionary American elitist type Christianity seems pretty opposite that kind of idea.
Yeah, no, it's like on a basic level, as you say, just at odds with itself. But you know, you think, okay, well, we have nations, we're part of culture now, so sure, we'll leave that for a moment.
Sure.
And you think, okay, well, Jesus famously said, love thy neighbor, and you know, you must treat all with respect, and he fed the thousands on the hilltop, and he healed the sick and treated the wounded and such.
Yeah.
And let's look at what Trump's doing, and it's like cutting healthcare and sending masked goons after people to send them off to, you know, basically concentration camps at this point.
Yeah.
Like, and where's the Christianity in this? Where's the and so I put these things to him, which took ages because he, which we'll come on to in a second, he was very fixated on like a dozen right-wing scare stories. He kept telling me that he was really fixated on like trans people. He was just obsessed with all the horrible like fake stuff you can imagine.
Right.
He was upset. He kept saying, like, "Oh, there's 1 million migrants every month coming across the border." It was even more than that, actually. He said like 100,000 a day going into conservative
Holy
states.
Shit!
He said they were being flown over into conservative states to help get Republicans out of office, and like it's just every right wing lie that's been told by Fox News for like the last decade.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I find it fascinating because even if any of this had any substance, like it shouldn't be how someone who calls himself a follower of Jesus and God and such should view other human beings. But I think this speaks to the idea that right-wing religion isn't so much about like actual beliefs and such as it is about power. We have power, and we use whatever culturally relevant stuff exists to get that power. So in the same way that a nationalist tries to cultivate some sense of national identity from tenuous origins and such, the right-wing religious person uses the iconography of Christ or whatever as the means of connecting with people like Eric, who then end up swallowing thousands of conspiratorial lies.
That's crazy. So Eric considered himself a Christian.
Yes, he was very much about his icon was so a picture of Jesus sort of side on, and then there was a lion in front of it. Okay, which interesting.
So I'm curious, like did he actually have a logical square that circle kind of thing? Like, did he say like, I believe that we should keep all the immigrants out because of this religious reason, or did he just fully buy into the conspiracy instead?
So most of it was the conspiracy stuff, and he was very it was very frustrating to actually talk to him because he wouldn't, it wasn't like a conversation. It was, so you think this, well, what do you think of this? And this would be like some fake story about like immigrants shooting people or trans people doing something.
How many times did you have to say, I think that's fake?
It was pretty much every minute, to be honest. It was a very, I do really regret spending 2 hours with him.
Oh man!
But on the times he actually did get to the Christian stuff, there'd be some false justification, or he said, "Oh, Jesus said we should punish the wicked," and he'd say, "Well, what's wickedness? What's the actual the problem here?" And so I said, "Well," so he said, "Oh, they've broken the law," and so I said, "Well, the Roman Empire said that Christianity was against the law. They said that Christians were heretics and should be crucified and killed and such.
Yeah.
And he didn't answer, didn't care. And I think that is also one of the, I mean, the denial is a large part of being right wing, I feel, especially in America, where you're basically living off the stolen valor of other people's stuff to celebrate America as this great thing. But the fact that you've got someone who so professes to being like a follower of Christ and stuff and doesn't even seem to know and recognize what Jesus did. Like that's another thing as well. We spoke about how Jesus criticized wealthy organizations and churches and such. He went into the temples and said, well, why have you got all this gold when there's people starving right outside? Right. And so I said, well, how can you spare supporting Billy? Because he was also a big Elon Musk fan. He was telling me about how he's a great entrepreneur and stuff. And so I said, well, how can you square this with what Jesus said? And he's like, well, actually, there were wealthy Christians that Jesus was a fan of.
What?
It's news to me, right? Like it's
literally said it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. So what are you talking about?
It's staggering. But if you think about it, and I think this is sort of one of the themes and points that I think is so important. There's so many televangelist type, high profile religious figures who lean into being the connection to God and such. And you look at their lives and they've got these mansions, they've got massive amphitheatre, they're supporting a political party which wants to take away healthcare and destroy like public life basically. And you realise that it is purely just something they've said to get people on board, not something they actually believe in. Like there's it's the conflation of power with religion, which I think is tricky because there is some belief there. Like they do, I'm sure a lot of them genuinely believe in an all-powerful God and such. Yeah. But because that's become so meshed with the right-wing way of, oh yes, we must be entrepreneurs and capitalists and we've got to look out for ourselves and such, it's just a mess. And there's no way of tackling the bad capitalist stuff without also in their mind attacking their God and making it a personal attack. Hence Eric's abrasive, awful tone throughout the whole debate, because in his mind, basically all I'm saying to him is, oh, your religion is bad and I hate Jesus and whatever.
So there's some progressive religious people out there, right? How does someone like Eric, or maybe he probably didn't answer anything like this, but I'm curious what your thoughts are. How would somebody like Eric compare themselves to like a Martin Luther King or somebody who used their faith to improve the lot of the less fortunate?
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, a lot of the time when you say this sort of thing, they'll just say that, oh, they're doing it wrong or they've been led astray by something. But I think you can see similar, I mean, even just the fact that there are so many inter-religion, different dominions and such within a religion sort of tells you that there's a lot of people struggle to, a lot of people just coexist, a lot of people don't care. You meet someone who goes to a Catholic church, most of them probably won't care that some Christians don't follow Catholicism. It's just, one of the, it's something in their background. It's not like a defining feature. But of these people in particular, I think the way they get ingratiated with right-wing stuff is in the same channels as a lot of right-wing propaganda, which is in the organisation of wealth. So churches obviously are exempt from paying tax. Many of them share organising bodies of not just the church itself, but other lobby groups and connections with corporations and wider networks of wealth. And when you put the two together, you have you've got a congregation, which is a large pool of people that are also paying consumers in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And you've got access to all their networks and their social spaces and their daily routines. And so it becomes one big organization to keep people in line. And in the same way that you go back to Middle Ages in England, and you've got churches basically telling their citizens, just stay, loyal to the king and just be good peasants and keep working the land. It's what God wants. And conveniently, it keeps the king in control of his treasury and his army and such,
Yeah.
whilst the peasants are living in serfdom, right? Like,
Yeah.
it keeps the natural order of stuff. And as we go through time, obviously, we've had progress, right? People have realised and fought for social change, and so you have people who are religious and don't believe in serfdom and such, but you've got a lot of effort put into maintaining this class structure, and so religion's a good tool for that, because if you have people following the word of a pastor or a priest, if that priest is saying right-wing stuff, then you've got a large amount of a congregation that's going to also believe it. And I think America is interesting too, because the country is its history is unavoidably racist, sexist, bigoted, nationalist. Like, it's always going to be easy to tap into these themes with people who are already in those sort of circles. So if you live, I mean, Eric, not to assume, but he sounded like he wasn't in an urban population. I think he was somewhere in
fairly rural, kind of.
Yeah, like, you go, but some of these places are practically unchanged from like 100 years ago. And so what was happening 100 years ago? You've got Jim Crow, you've got people who were on the Confederate side of the Civil War still around 100 years ago, who you can imagine became pastors. You've probably got some overlap with far-right groups like the KKK and white nationalist militias. You've got religion, the religious people who believed that it was a white man's right to own slaves and taught that as gospel for over a century. All of this, and even the reaction to, you mentioned Martin Luther King, like, lots of people in the Deep South taught that he was the Antichrist. Obama was the Antichrist. So this long history of bigotry, welded with religion, welded with right-wing nonsense, creates people like Eric who just hear this hateful stuff their whole lives and can only interpret things through this lens. Hence it was just incredible how many times he said to me, like, men invading women's faces, men believing they're women, blah blah blah, just over and over and over again. And it really was dogmatic. Like, that's not even hyperbole. It was just, that is the line that was started but somewhere in the organization, and then his pastors said it to him, his news has said it to him, social media, and now it's just the attack line.
It years ago, so like before actually a lot of this trans panic kind of was at the pinnacle, right? I was arguing with somebody on Facebook back when I still argued with people on Facebook, and they were. It was the same talking points that you see now. It was like there's only two sexes, there's only man and a woman. This is basic science. We all grew up with this. Blah blah blah. And I was, at the time, I kind of assumed, like, okay, stop watching Fox News. Like, you got to stop listening to the pundit that you're listening to. But it's like you say, like, it's coming from so many angles, and it's the same talking points repeated over and over and over again. So now people like Eric, or the person I was arguing with back then, like, they believe it's their own original thought to be like, but obviously there's only two genders or whatever, right? So yeah, it's they've just been brainwashed, essentially.
And then they've got the counteract to that as well. So they'll say, the woke mind virus, woke.
Right.
And before woke, it was critical race theory, political correctness, DEI. They always have a host of conspiracies and thinly veiled, racist terms as well, by the way. Like, it's not lost that a lot of these terms were, like woke came from African American communities, saying, yes, I'm awake to the racial prejudice and violence of the American state, which, let's be honest, I mean, yes, of course that's there, like, of course it's happening. But, the fact that they constantly have a stream of this keeps people like Eric in line, keeps them in line, and because it's their environment, because it's their culture around them, they don't see it as someone's told them this, they see it as what is intuitively true. Hence them intuitively in their minds arguing, of course men and women are two distinct, these are the only categories, and it's how I say it is. Right. It's just ideological as you say, brainwashing. It conditions people into it. And I think when you say brainwashing as well, we're very, because of science fiction, we imagine
Right.
like someone's literally got like a Men in Black pen and zap them, and now they believe all stuff they believe. But no, it's how their culture is formed around them.
Yeah.
Even just as a society that literally segregated its races is of course going to have racism it built into its systems.
Yeah.
You know, they literally had slavery 150 years ago, which is not that long. Like,
Nope.
I know a lot of racists like to say, like, oh yeah, it was 100 years ago. It's only a few generations. Like, your grandparents likely knew someone who was involved in slavery,
Yep.
right? Like, so it's not exactly, and as though as well, when the Civil Rights Act was signed, they just like in The Grinch, where your heart just grew three times. Like, it's not as though all the racists just like, yeah, this was wrong, guys.
You know, actually, yeah, like I changed my mind completely. Yeah, like those people who were standing outside of schools fighting against segregation or against desegregation, against the combining of schools. Those people, the day after, they just went home and they're like, actually, it's okay, right?
It's shocking. I mean, some of those people are alive now, and they all vote still as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And crucially, they taught their kids and their church congregations and their friends the racism. You know, they it's built into their way of life.
Yeah,
and so I think for someone like Eric, who has had this all their life, in some ways, when they meet criticism of it makes them double down in some ways. Like, it makes them, because they so dogmatic, they're so fixated, and a large part of that is because it's their belief. Like I said a minute ago, like, he believes in God, and so his interpretation of religion is like his whole existence basically is defined by it. And so
it's interesting
when he's thinking about his views on gender, it's informed by Adam and Eve, right? Like, God made Adam and then he made Eve, and that is also why we have our fixed sort of gender binary ideas, because a lot of that is just what the Bible said and what people taught the Bible as having said.
Right.
There's no, and so in the same way that missionaries went to tribes in Southern Africa and India and such and said, yeah, here's what our society looks like, Eric takes this to the world and applies it to whatever he likes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm curious because I've been so one of the podcasts I listen to is called Conspirituality, and they kind of talk about the crossover between kind of cult beliefs, the wellness industry, and like religion and power. And so they're talking about the one they're talking about like a kind of on a couple of the episodes a left-wing-ish or more progressive pastor who goes around and he debates other right-wing religious people, and like essentially he's saying like his message is these things that you're saying are anti-Christianity. And so I always find it interesting, like, how did that guy develop his beliefs in the same environment as, say, these other people develop these other beliefs that are antithetical to each other?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's a mix of factors, right? So part of it is luck. I think if you, like, my parents aren't massive raging right-wing bigots, so
right?
That's definitely helped. I can't. I mean, who knows what Eric's parents were like, right? But I'd be willing to bet they share a lot of Eric's social, religious, political views, right? So I think it's that. I think there's also an element of where you are, like, in society, right? Mm-hmm. So we in the UK, in Canada, are lucky to have secular state education, which is, whilst obviously struggling with funding and such, still largely, it's got a solid curriculum where things are taught in a neutral way. You know, we in RE class learned about religions and such, but we also learned that they are things separate to, that you can choose which religion you have, and you can also choose to be an atheist. There's choice, right?
Right.
And obviously that's quite a liberal, like, yes, you can choose what you like and everyone can
Yeah,
do
that's
that.
right.
But in some ways that's fine, right? Like it's
Yep.
Of course we should learn about what the world's major religions are and such. In American schools, there's a massive battleground over even teaching anything outside Christianity. Like they're literally trying to destroy the idea that secular neutral teaching in schools is so much anathema. They're trying to put the Bible as they teach it directly into the school. And so when you've got that, and especially like it's one thing, in short, like lots of schools are still fine in America-ish. Like if you go to school in like California somewhere or New York, you're probably okay. But imagine going to school in like Alabama, in some town, in some city with 1,000 people in it, where most people are part of a congregation and have been there for the last 200 years, and there's a Confederate flag flying probably on the town.
Yeah.
Like, you imagine trying to teach a secular school curriculum in that environment, and you're going to meet a lot of resistance. And so let's imagine Eric as a kid. He said to me he was born in 1958. So he's going to school in the 60s and 70s throughout the ironically, one of the greatest periods of gaining rights in American history, the civil rights movement, but also a time when racists were vociferous and loud and still actively had a racist policy to defend in political circles and such. The US government had to step in and tell states, no, you cannot keep segregation. So their states were openly racist and openly actively fighting for white supremacist Christian theocracy and such. So I think that has a huge impact on, say, the pastor. The pastor that ends up left wing has had to overcome all. If they grew up in Alabama, they've had to overcome so much more.
Right.
There's someone. That sounds like I'm saying it's like worse in Alabama and such. Like it's obviously people. It's not as though everyone in California believes in progress and stuff.
Right.
And equally, people in Alabama also want to progress and such. But social factors, I think, are important in shaping someone. There's also elements of like personal connections too. Like if you're even just as a kid, like if you grow up and you're friends with someone who's black, gay, a woman or whatever, and you see people in the church for like, well, yeah, you can't come in, you're black. Like that might have a profound effect on you. You might think, because of course you might think this, like, yeah, this is ridiculous. Why on earth can I not sit with my friend who happens to be black?
Yeah. No, it's I find it. There's got to be, on some level, some insight into the way that, like, conservative people or people who are raised in the same sort of environment as conservative people aren't or don't become conservative. There's got to be some sort of insight that can help us convert conservative people there, right?
Yeah. Education's a massive one. I think it's not a coincidence that people who learn the facts about society end up leaning left, because, like, of course, if you learn that burning oil and coal and gas leads to massive amounts of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere and creating the greenhouse effect, which heats the planet and melts the ice caps and all the other horrible stuff, like, of course you're going to think, yeah, let's be a bit greener.
Yeah.
If you it's about education, exposure. Like the reason, another really interesting thing about some of these groups is that the way they send you out to try and convert people isn't so much to convert other people, but to keep you in the in-group. So like when you listen to some creationists talk about religion, and it sounds, a lot of it, fantastical, right? Like it doesn't, you just almost have to stop yourself from laughing sometimes when you hear it, because it doesn't sound real.
Yeah.
And that's the point. They want you to, for what the person saying it, to feel alienated a lot of the time, because it keeps them closer to the group that already shares their beliefs. It's tricky sometimes to break free from groups which are, your people and such. So someone like Eric, who probably, let's be honest, isn't going to find much support with people outside his extremely right-wing version of Christianity, will double down on it, because they're now his social group. When I was in his chat, there was someone in the chat saying Owen must repent for his sins, and there's someone else saying that he's a brainwashed British person at university or whatever. Like, these aren't people that are endearing and pleasant to people. These are people who are all together because they feed off each other's hatred for the left and for the sinners and such. Like, it's very much a angry, antagonistic relationship with the rest of the world, which then also fuels the belief. So I think breaking down that education, exposure to other people and diversity and such, and just like a healthier society as well, because you also look at, like, not to be mean, but Eric, well, he had like a tube in his nose. He's older. He told me he was a veteran and that he'd, like, you know, seen many of his friends die and such from, you know, not having money for various treatments. And obviously he was blaming that on immigrants and such.
Oh my God.
Like, how can you blame, you know, immigrants making minimum wage or less versus like Elon Musk, who's got $1 billion and is not paying any tax, or the government taking money away from healthcare and education and such to give to ICE or military? And he wasn't hearing it, but you know, it's that as well. So I think a mix of those three things: education, exposure, and you know, improving people's material conditions.
I guess I'm kind of blown away because, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but it is. It's like how is the immigrant who is struggling to survive in any way responsible for your hardships?
It's shocking, isn't it? Like, and it's sort of that nationalist, racist fear, isn't it?
Yeah.
They don't care about immigrants from other, you know, majority white nations, right? Like, no one's stopping, I don't know, Jim Schwartz because he's not, you know, potentially an American, because Germany is a nation they associate as white.
Right.
It's when it's, I don't know, Juan Garcia, who is a dangerous Mexican man. Like, and it ignores that. I mean, they know. I think, and many of them know on some level that it's nonsense, because America is a diverse country. Like, unless, I mean, maybe it's different for Eric because he might live in the middle of nowhere where there's not many people of color and immigrants and such. But most, especially in the South, like there's no way you can walk around in like a southern city of any decent size and not encounter people from different nationalities and who obviously have different backgrounds and such. And even if they weren't, like, America is only a nation that's a few hundred years old. Like, everyone in America came from different, you know, the indigenous populations in America are the ones who would say that the true indigenous American populace, but thanks to white supremacy, they aren't seen as such. They're raised from the American narrative and treated as basically people like, well, the same as any of the other marginalized people in America, told, you know, we took over, too bad, and got up from it.
Well, you think like somehow they've convinced themselves. Like my partner hates the phrasing of it. They call themselves like native to America, and she's like, well, but they're not. They're descendants of people who emigrated here. It's like, you're right. They're not technically native to America. Like they didn't, but that's the way they have to frame it, right? They have to say like, we're the true Americans. And this is, I think too, I often bring it back to the book that I read, The Operating System, an anarchist theory of the state. They are the core identity group, right? So then the state uses the core identity group as these are the people we care about, and capitalist and state powers appeal to those people in a variety of ways, and anyone who's outside of those groups or that core group, and in America it's white, Christian, and often just men, and it's like this is the group that gets all the rights. This is the group that we appeal to. And everybody else can be framed as the enemy of the state, I guess.
Yeah, I think that there's it's a really good point actually, because like even with the when you were saying that, I was thinking of the anti-trans stuff. Like they loads of them were fixated for a while on the what is a woman, right? And they they're obsessed with this because in their mind there's some gotcha where you like have to somehow go back to their definition of some
Right.
and then that makes the left fall apart. But when you really analyze that question and think about it critically, it would instead be on the person, the right-wing person insisting upon it to actually try and define it, and they would inevitably meet the actual reality of science, which is that the body is not neatly packaged into one set model.
That's right.
And that ultimately it's a socially constructed thing. But then to answer that question properly is to interrogate critically the way that right-wing religious organizing factors in society have constructed humanity around certain ideals. Like in the same way that American, like people have an idea of it as like the stars and the stripes and stuff, and oh yes, I'm American, I'm white, basically. And as you said, every other marginalized group has to engage with this first before they are able to properly make a case for themselves, because of the way power organizes itself. Like, of course, it's ridiculous that anyone would have to entertain racism, sexism, homophobia, and such. But because of the existing power, we're stuck constantly rotating around it. In the same way that it should be ridiculous that someone like Eric's worldview is at all legitimate in any like conditional setting. But here we are with Trump basically saying many of the same things in the White House, and his lackeys and peers and such in government making and writing policies based on such a worldview. And I think that it makes for sobering thoughts, really, because it's not like, in my mind, when again to hark back to the innocence and folly of youth, I remember thinking that people like Eric were just like little weirdos in America who existed and were a pain, but were largely sort of fading out of relevancy. But I think we again need to be mindful of the economy and such, and of our wider power structures, and look at how capitalism keeps many of these social ills relevant because of the connection to power and wealth, and how all these social factors combine to create the system of power that capitalists rely on to maintain their wealth.
Yeah, because you can't get away from the material conditions, right? And the way that being, so he's a veteran who has health issues, who is struggling to survive in the world, and that leaves him vulnerable to a level of propaganda that maybe somebody who's more privileged and more well educated and has had less struggles in their life doesn't have, or like isn't as susceptible to, perhaps.
Yeah, but I think it's also because I found myself even then like thinking, there's plenty of people who are in similar situations, and
that's true.
On their fellow man, right? Like this is not so, because it's very, lots of right-wing people love trying to claim, oh yes, we're the party of the working class, workers love us, the fascists. Like, I think, of course, there are people who are poorer who definitely do subscribe to this sort of stuff, but there's also a much larger group of people who aren't political in a sense that they are active registered voters or whatever, and maybe don't even vote, but would happily point to Trump and say, yeah, this is ridiculous, like we don't support ICE going off and tearing away through the neighborhood and such, and we don't support like cutting healthcare so the army can have a new jet that you're going to sit in the garage or whatever. Like, and so I think also, of course, that vulnerability is definitely there, but there's also an element of like the racial element. He is someone who lived in the South, who's been surrounded by racialized politics for his whole lifetime, basically. And as a result has, rather than critically think about why he and his fellow veterans are often met with quite harsh conditions, basically, telling me that he has no problem with ICE showing up and deporting someone on his street if they're illegal. Like it's staggering. It's also it's also like a lack of like if they don't have access to resources, how can you sit and support the mass austerity program that's cutting federal funding for programs?
It's weird.
Like it's so staggering, but it's that delusion not in a sort of hysterical, not in a formative sense, but literal delusion.
Right.
You have to be deluded to focus on something like an immigrant, not having some paperwork, somehow being responsible for mass cuts to healthcare. Like what is that?
Like it's like you say, like it's not the pejorative term, like delusional. Like it's literally a delusional view of what's happening. Like it's very strange.
Yeah. And I think
oh,
go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, and it that we see like entire like media structures built up around this kind of like perpetuating this delusion in the citizens,
which itself is funded by massive sources of wealth. I mean, all these networks was not like, obviously they've got big numbers, but you have more reach if you spend millions and millions advertising, propagating.
I could increase my reach by buying ads on YouTube. Like I could
exactly, right? And it's not even just ads. It's if you're a massive right-wing influencer, you can support other people and build them up by just having them constantly on your talk shows and linking to their videos, and the algorithms then recognize that all these videos are largely the same, and so they just keep circling round and round. What's it called? Search engine optimization, where someone types in like police and the first 10 results are all like the same. Immigrant causes mass shooting, black person does this. Like, it's not hard to see how this sort of stuff, gets spread around and such. And then also when you think far right figures who do the really vulgar, like Breitbart for ages had like a black crime tab on their news section, like black crime, and it like I remember because I'm a curious person, I once went on there and just had a look, and it's the most banal, like John, who is black, shots a man, and he's a known criminal. And it's just like, even if you accepted their reporting at face value and didn't even question any of the facts, that you're hearing this secondhand from some police officer that in like middle of nowhere, and there's no context for why this person, like, it's not ethical reporting. Even if you took it at face value, someone's race has no influence on what is happening, because race is a social construct, and because melanin in the skin does not determine why someone fires a gun at someone else. It's baseless.
It's so weird that, because like if you learn about genetics on any level, like the difference between the genetic difference between white people and black people doesn't exist. Right? Like,
exactly.
Like there is no difference. We're all still just humans.
Exactly. Strange. And we learned this over for centuries, even knowing this. I mean, we know it intuitively, right? Because when you have kids, they don't see skin color because it's learned. It's something you learn. Yeah. But in the same way, I always think like one way of looking at it would be: can you imagine if there was a report and the person was like, "Oh, this man has just there's been a car crash. This man's just driven their car into a wall. He had blue eyes." Right. Like, they'd never say that.
Blue-eyed people are just bad drivers.
Yeah. Or if they said, "Oh, this guy was 5'8", he just shot someone 5'8", like no one would care. Like, you think, what on earth's going on? But you introduce things that have been politicized, like race, gender, and all of a sudden it becomes a massive scandal if you've you mentioned it last time about the fixation with reporting on people's ethnicity and nationality and such. And in America, it's become even worse. I mean, literally, the Supreme Court has just said that ICE are legally allowed to racially profile people in their endeavors to take control of American immigration policy or whatever, i.e. just racistly deport whoever they like based on nothing but racist ideas of what is America.
And of course, they're getting sent into blue cities, like democratic cities that are have a large immigrant population. So then they can just go in and take a whole bunch of people out, and apparently it's fine. I don't understand this stuff.
I mean, Eric, he supported ICE because in his mind, they're illegals, they're criminals, they're aliens. He was telling me about how he was like, oh, would you call a thief a thief? Would you call a drunkard a drunkard, a murderer a murderer? So immediately you can sort of read between the lines and essentially see that all immigrants are typecast as holding negative criminal values, which ignores the fact that there's plenty of Americans who do these things. Like, it's
Of
not
course,
as though America's some idyllic paradise and then suddenly the immigrants came. But that's exactly the story that's been portrayed by these right-wing sources because of the same white supremacist nonsense that's been in America for centuries now. The white man civilizes, everyone else is savage, to be either turned American, i.e. white and made civil, or to be kept away by force and militant power.
And yeah, like you say, like there's going to be people who will never be able to achieve quote unquote whiteness because there always has to be that out group, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, skin color is something, I guess, that's easily identifiable. So then you can just be like, oh, well, you know, these brown folks, these Arab folks, they're just, we don't want them here, I guess. And yeah.
And funnily enough, with perfectly with capitalism, because I mean, the obvious one is the fact that slavery made America very rich.
Yes.
Gave America free slave labor for over a century.
Yep.
But then also the relationship, because it's not as though, for as much as they talk about America being American and we're going to have American jobs and such, they need the trade of the globe to thrive as a nation, right? Like, they exist in a world that they have put themselves on the top of the markets of. They benefit from exploitative practices where, like American corporations buying land in third world nations and privatizing it, and then claiming it's part of their economic aid package to help them. Like, they know full well that the economy they've created creates much of the division that makes people go to America in the first place, which is why they're poorer immigrants, and then lets them set up the whole, look, the immigrants are taking XYZ. Like, it's all a scam. But it's one that self-circles and perpetuates itself and traps people like Eric into cycles of nonsense.
I guess our main recording is now at almost an hour, but I do want to ask you what you think, because yesterday, renowned bigot and monster Charlie Kirk was killed, and we have a lot of online discourse right now about, like, is it okay to not be sad about this?
Well, my answer will be, so I think it's always telling when we think about violence. Violence exists throughout the world we live in. As we're recording this now, a mass shooting has happened in Denver, Colorado, I think. Right. Not the first one this year, won't be the last one this year. There's people being kicked off their healthcare. There's ICE agents storming around, basically grabbing people off for indefinite detention. There's drone strikes happening. There's genocide happening in numerous places around the world. And we're supposed to drop everything for some right-wing focus on one specific incident. I think anyone who is asking us to, oh yes, you must agree to all our right-wing hysteria about this incident, should first engage with all the stuff I've just mentioned and more. Probably I didn't say all of it. There's tons and tons of examples. Violence is something which exists, and it's the violence that is pointed out which dominates so much of our narrative. I mean, don't even discuss the fact that Democrat senator was literally killed, and like, there certainly weren't lowering flags to half-mast and trying to make national holidays and stuff with that, were they? So
no, that's right.
No, I think it's intentionally a bad. I mean, we'll leave the. I mean, say we'll leave the authorities to investigate it, but who knows? But I'm not interested. I'd rather think about the ongoing violence of right-wing society than fixate on one individual case of right-wing violence.
We talk about, like, because I do the news every 2 weeks on Loose Wires. We do news items and whatnot, and almost every 2 weeks I have some conversation about what's going on in Palestine right now, and much of the discourse obviously that's inherent, like incredible violence carried out by a powerful state, endorsed by other powerful states, and against innocent people. And I see a lot of people who are really upset about about others not being sad when Charlie Kirk gets killed, talking about political violence is never okay. And then they never seem to like acknowledge, like, even on a basic level, there's this like literal genocide happening in Palestine. And like you say, like there's also all kinds of other kinds of violence going on in the United States. And it's all political. Like, this is the thing that I don't think they get, is like, it's all political violence. Just because this one is a shooter who may or may not have had an agenda, I don't even know. Maybe I don't even know the details of why this happened, right?
Well, that's the other thing, right? Like it's not even 24 hours removed from the event, and you've got these massive walls of text on Twitter of like, the fact that I always think it's interesting when you've got people saying, oh, the woke Democrats have caused this, blah, blah. Like, they've been saying this about every single news story for decades now, right? Like, no matter what had happened on that day, they would still produce the Democrats are killing people every day, blah, 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 about whatever culture war thing they've decided. Like, the fact that it's actually like been an actual death this time is not really of any difference to what they were saying. Like, in regards to, as you've just said quite well as well, like the fact that violence is all around us in the world and they only notice it when it's like a literal gun being, shot at someone. Yeah. Sort of speaks to the fact that their worldview is quite poorly constructed anyway, because like, if you were really thinking about violence, how could you have said nothing about Palestine, South Sudan, the Congo, Yemen? The list goes on, right? Like
exactly. It's absurd. We're all obsessed. We're supposed to be upset about this one pundit getting killed, while, like you say, like so many people are being killed and enslaved and harmed in a variety of ways throughout, all of the capitalist world. So
yeah. And on top of all of that as well, like the fact that shootings have been so common in America, they're basically endemic to the American experience, and people have said for ages, like, these are things you could do to make it easier. And not only have they laughed in the face of that and ignored it, they've also actively done the opposite. They've literally seized upon the gun movement as part of their we'll make America great again, and got rid of a load of the stuff that was making it harder for, trying to put preventative measures in to stop shootings in public space and stuff.
And in fact, Charlie Kirk himself was one person who said that after a school shooting, he said that it was justified and in the name of maintaining the Second Amendment. So
exactly, right? Like, if
Charlie Kirk himself would be a fan of his own death as long as it maintains the Second Amendment.
One way of looking at it as well, like if someone who spent their life campaigning against seatbelts one day drove too fast and was thrown out of their windscreen and died, like, you would, like, sure, his family would grieve, but you would be like, well, it's
not to be dark. Not to be dark about it, but that's literally what poetic justice is. Like, that's what that means, right? Like,
indeed.
I am not a person who generally, like, I don't go woohoo when people die, but I can look at this situation and go, okay, I don't care. And the only reason that I have to have that's right. And the only reason I have to have an opinion about it is because everybody else seems to have an opinion about it. So,
and right-wing manufacturing of the issue as well. Like, they could let law enforcement do their
that's
work
right.
out. Well, we don't even know what's happened, right? Like, if it turns out that, like with the Trump shooting, right, like where it turned out it was a Republican, like, and then all of a sudden, the Democrats are trying to assassinate all conservatives, just went out the window, and they went back to their other dozen culture war nonsense. Like, there's no telling what has happened because it's less than a day old. So the fact that they've got incessant wall-to-wall coverage of this tells you that it's already an issue that's manufactured and contorted to fit their own terms, and that's why a lot of it should just be left and not even touched, and we should focus on the actual consistent societal violence of fascism, right-wing politics and such.
And in fact, it was like less than an hour, and they were talking about how the shooter was potentially a trans person. So like, it's clear they have no facts backing up their perspective, and they just are out there immediately turning what many people would just ignore into like a political tool to radicalize people on their side into more violence, actually. But
yeah, exactly.
but I guess I'll hit the stop button here right away. And but before we do that, where can people find you?
As always, Owen Macdonald is my channel, where if you for some reason want to have a listen to people like Eric chat with me, you can find some of my streams. And I'm also under that name on Blue Sky as well.
I did appreciate at the start of your debate with Eric, you put a disclaimer.
I thought you needed it. I mean, obviously content warnings are good, but
yeah,
I don't normally edit my videos too much. It was lifted from his channel, so I thought as I'm going to have to put it onto like a little bit of software anyway, I'll just add that tagline to the start of it as well.
Yeah, I thought this is a good thing. I'm prepared, and then once I saw his face again, like I say, like, and I try not to judge people based on their appearance, but like, he had a white beard and white hair, and
he doing into his nose.
He looks like somebody that I'm going to disagree with. So I did not want to. And then the disclaimer at the start, and I'm like, you know what? Actually, I don't have the emotional wherewithal to sit through this. So.